It's the wonder of nature, baby!
Good evening, everybody. It's Thursday here, 8 o'clock on Readout Productions, and welcome back to Uncut History. Here we are, another week, and we have a guest this time. Somebody has decided to fall down the rabbit hole that is this YouTube channel and join us together to talk about history. We got James of Project Past, a fellow. What do we call ourselves? Because you got like booktubers, history tubers.
A fellow ordinary guy who makes videos that maybe a handful of people watch.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, that's what I like.
Well, James, thank you for coming on tonight. I've been wanting to get you on for quite some time. I've been a follower of your channel ever since you started. The first video I stumbled across of yours was when you went to Appomattox, and It wasn't when you went into the McLean house, but it was actually the video on the Battle of Appomattox. Because yes, there was an actual battle at Appomattox Courthouse. People forget about that. John B. Gordon led the last charge of the Army of Northern Virginia, captured a few Union pieces at the end of it all and everything.
Yeah.
So that was how I first got into your channel, and I've been following you ever since. But we'll talk about James and how he got his channel started. We're going to talk about a whole lot of stuff, but the first things first. How are you doing, James?
I am fantastic, Spencer. Thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here on this leap day. One of the greatest mysteries is, if you're born on February 29th, do you celebrate your birthday on the 28th or March 1st? I need more insight into that question. Do you celebrate both days? Do you alternate years? I mean, this is an important question I'm trying to figure out.
I am glad I never had that conundrum.
Right?
Actually, I don't have any immediate people I know that have that conundrum. But if you're somebody out there who has that conundrum, let us know in the chat how you handle that situation. Because it's supposed to keep us in line with the Earth's rotation or
science
something.
And stuff, and
the more they explain it to me, the more I get confused. It's like it's one of the things. Like you have an extra day once every 4 years. Yep. Yes. Don't question it. When you start questioning,
an extra day that we have to work. It's an extra day that we don't make money or we spend money. It's just conspiracy.
It's conspiracy. Oh my God. Skunks Workshop's in the chat tonight. Levi the Nerd is here.
Oh, Levi, Dustin's
Hello. Here. Ghost of Howard's right arm.
Is he related to Ghost of Sickles' Leg?
Who knows?
I get some comments from a page called the Ghosts of Sickles' Leg.
Is there a ghost of Stonewall's arm? Is there that?
No. Who knows?
I like the Howard one. I really like the Howard one. That's some deep lore there. So James, you've been on the Tube since 2021, at least with the channel we know you as.
Yep.
How did you even get involved with history? Where does it all go?
Oh man, you got to go back when I was a kid, maybe first or second grade. I don't even know the exact age, but one weekend my dad made the mistake of popping in Gettysburg into the old VCR, and from then on I was hooked. As a young boy, you always have play tanks and plastic soldiers and all that stuff. But then he popped in. There it is. That's my childhood.
I popped it in,
and I was hooked.
Sitting here.
Yeah, I was hooked. It was something visual that I was able to latch onto and, always refer back to that. Any time I was in a history class in school or something like that, that would always pop into my mind. And, Gettysburg is one of those things where, it's a very sanitized version of what happened. So, you don't get all the blood and guts. You get a lot of like the glorized and, the honor of all the fighting and stuff. So, from then on, I was hooked. And then, it was around the time where Saving Private Ryan came out a few years later. And then you had, of course, 9/11 happened. And then you just had like a lot of very militaristic movies coming out, Black Hawk Down, tons of others, The Patriot. That was another good one that, I latched onto, watched hundreds of times. And, it just stuck with me. The older I got, in high school, you started hanging out with friends more and playing sports and things like that. But I always would go back to it. If I had a day to myself, I would be watching back when the History Channel had history, believe it or not,
That was a
war
long,
combat.
long time ago.
Long time ago, shows like the Civil War Combat or Mail
Yes.
Call or, classics.
I don't remember Mail Call. What was that?
With Arlie Ermy. Oh, it was great.
Oh, okay. Now I know what we're talking about. Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know that was the name for it.
And then Tales of the Gun, and there was Weapons at War. Like, and that's what I grew up on, those things. And then graduated high school, and then I became a firefighter. And, it was just always an interest of mine. I didn't really do anything with it. And then during COVID, everything was kind of shutting down and stuff. And I was on YouTube. At the time, she was my girlfriend, but my wife and I, we talked about when everything opens up again, we're going to go on a nice road trip. She's a history teacher. So obviously 2 peas in a pod. We were going to go on a nice East Coast history road trip. So I was just researching stuff for that. Came across a channel called the History Underground. I don't know if you've heard of it. Very small channel.
It's this little thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Very small channel. Little. But so I started following him. I believe is one of his DC videos, because that was one of the places we were going. And, I watched, I was like, oh, that was pretty cool. And then like on the sidebar, you just get the recommendations, came across his Band of Brothers stuff. And I was just hooked on his videos. I texted my wife, I was sending her the links and stuff. She was like, oh, that's really cool. Came home from work and, my wife's like, why don't you do that? You like videoing stuff. You love military history. I was like, I can barely have a conversation with another adult. There's no way I can go to a site and film stuff. So fast forward to 2021, and my wife again was like, you watch all of JD's videos. You're constantly on YouTube watching stuff. She's like, just try it. I think she was trying to get me out of the house. So I created the page and made a logo, and I kind of sat on it for a few months. And one time my wife was out of town. It was just me home. I was like, you know what? I'm going to go to Fort Caroline, just north of Jacksonville. And I'm just going to film it. So I went there, and, you know how awkward it is when you got the camera in front of you and there's people around. You're like, all right, am I really going to do this? And then you're trying to wait where there's no one around. And so I made the video. I shot it on my phone. I edited it on my phone. You mentioned my Appomattox video. I'm sorry, because that was, all my videos make me nauseous, but I feel like the first 30, is such a learning process. And, as a YouTuber, like you're learning on the fly, and you're learning what people like and don't like, and you're learning how to edit more efficiently. Not that I think my videos are outstanding now, but I am a little more comfortable with my videos now as opposed to when I started. But yeah, so that's how I started. My wife encouraged me. I went out and I started filming, and the channel has evolved since then. Instead of just going to a site and doing an overview of what happened, ABC, that's stuff that anyone can go on Google and do that themselves. So as the channel started progressing, I was like, you know what if I get a little more intimate with the stories? What if I get more personal? And, I went to Yorktown. I really think that's when my channel started evolving. I did a video about, the Battle of Yorktown itself, stopping at several locations, doing a brief summary of what happened. And I was like, you know what, I have more time here. Why don't I do a video on just the town of Yorktown with all the historic structures there? Why don't I do a video just on the redoubts of Yorktown? And then the Battle of the Hook across the bay, So
then breaking it down definitely helps get the message across better than just trying to hit the highlights in one video. It's like, I'd never seen anybody go into with the exception of the American Battlefield Trust, I think. I've
Mhm.
seen very few people actually do something in downtown Yorktown in the
Yeah.
historic district,
And that was
which
one of
was
those places I made my parents take me as a kid. So going back there is a bit of nostalgia. But yeah, so I was like, like this town was in the center of not only the American Revolution, but fast forward, 140 years later or so, and then the American Civil War is at their doorstep. So there's a lot of history just in that town. So, and then, like I said, Battle of the Hook, and then I did the readouts. And then from then on, I went to Gettysburg, and I started doing brief overviews on certain portions of the battlefield. Then you started diving deeper into individual regiments and the
that's where the
stories
fun
of.
begins.
Yes, that's I found out like brigade level and down, especially dealing with the Civil War. I understand it better. You start throwing out divisions and corps, and I get a little confused. Believe it or not, when you get down to the brigade level, you have 4 regiments or 5 regiments, depending on who you're covering, and you're covering this portion of the battlefield, and this is what these guys did, not the army, but this is what these guys did, and I start to understand things a little better. So that's where I'm at now.
Yeah, your most recent video was about the 14th Brooklyn
hmm
and their involvement fighting out there between Seminary Ridge and McPherson Ridge. Some of the ins and outs they got involved with near the railroad cut. They're one of the few
hmm
regiments at Gettysburg to actually have 3 different monuments on the battlefield.
Yeah, and
So I've definitely seen that shift to focusing more on the regimental history and involvement, which is the most fascinating stuff. You might agree with me where I have always advised people to go to Gettysburg because I'll get a lot of friends and family that they're going or like their first, second time, and they're
mhm,
looking for tips and tricks. And what I've always told people, and this is, you can actually use this rule for any Civil War site, large scale one, but this is Gettysburg. First time, get the highlights, get your bearings, figure out where everything's going. Return trip,
mhm,
find a unit
mhm,
before you're going out. A few weeks before, do some research, or if you're able to coordinate with a battlefield license guide and focus on one unit. It could be
mhm.
one regiment, one brigade. Before your trip is over in Gettysburg or wherever you decide to visit, you will have traveled to so many different locations a few people have seen before and see so many different perspectives. You will be engrossed in that trip.
Oh
That's
yeah,
my advice.
yeah. I mean, that's really good advice because, like we talked a little bit earlier, Gettysburg is so big and there's so many moving
Yeah.
parts, but also you have these grand open vistas and these beautiful fields that you can really sit in one spot and you can really follow a unit as they progress through the battlefield. And the interpretation there is second to none. There's plaques everywhere, there's monuments and division placards and brigade tablets. I mean, you should leave Gettysburg, at least if you're not even interested in the Civil War, knowing how important it was, at least. But yeah, and we're spoiled with Gettysburg, especially being into the Civil War. You can go there and pretty much have anything at your disposal. The resources online are, I mean, endless. But then you can go to a battle like Alusty, which is like 2 hours away from me, hour and a half away from me, and there's a couple monuments, and there's no flank markers, there's no tablets, there's a couple signs. It's a very nice battlefield, don't get me wrong, but the interpretation is you have to do a little research to kind of
Yeah.
get your bearings on smaller battlefields like that.
Now, I do have to make mention because one of my longest tenured guests, Wrangler, has popped in briefly. Can't stay too long, but he is going to drop a 420. Yes, he insists on staying that way. And it also requires the obligatory. Yeah, I have that on standby.
Perfect.
I'm building the I guess you want to say the clips, the meme clips. I guess
Yeah.
it's, gotta
Got a good
build them up.
soundboard going. I like it.
Oh well, I'm glad that you think I have a soundboard.
Well, I mean, a video board with sound.
Yeah, yeah,
It's your world. It's your world. You call it what you want.
exactly. But you mentioned Alusty, and Alusty has been one of your big subjects that you've covered. I think you've done at least 2 different videos thus far covering Alusty, and I know you're
Yeah.
planning to do more stuff because this month was the 160th of the battle.
Yeah. So the first time I went there early on, I think it was like my fifth or sixth episode. Didn't know a whole lot about the battle. Went there and just kind of did a brief overview of it. And as I left, I felt like I left a lot of things out that needed to be mentioned. And then so once I got an opportunity, again, the wife was out of town. What am I going to do? I'm going to make videos. So I went back to Alusty, this time a little more prepared. Was able to, through research with the American Battlefield Trust and a few other resources, was able to kind of pinpoint some of the locations of the regiments that fought there, including the famed 54th Mass, kind of the general area where they came through with their rearguard action. But also just where I forgot the regiment now that we're talking about it. It was a Confederate regiment that ran out of ammo, and they just sat there on the left flank and just held the line and just took volleys until more ammo was brought up to them. So just diving into more stories like that. The battleofalusty.org, I believe, is the website. They actually have like dozens of letters from soldiers from both sides that leave pretty vivid accounts. One of the accounts that I included was a Confederate soldier witnessed several of his comrades bayoneted, wounding United States colored troop soldiers on the field. And it was like one of the only accounts I could find from the Confederate side. So I was like, that's something that I left out in the first one that I need to include in this one, things like that. Just the brutality of war, and obviously the racial motivations behind some of it. But it's a battle that not only was the bloodiest battle in Florida, it was the largest. And I think it was the last attempt. Maybe there was an attempt later, but it essentially confined the Union to Jacksonville in Northeast Florida, so they wouldn't push out again to try and take Tallahassee. So it was important from at least a Confederate standpoint, holding on to Tallahassee. But it's extremely interesting. It's pretty much untouched. You can go there and see.
That's what I've heard. I know a lot of people said for battlefield preservation, no, you said there's a lot of monumentation. A lot of the living historians I talk to always rave about Alusty. They always like, you got to go down there. It's almost untouched compared to some other sites.
Yep. You have the main road, there's a railway, and then you have the battlefield. And, it probably isn't identical to what it was in 1864, but it's probably pretty close. There's no development there. You have your palmetto thickets and the pines, hence the battle in the pines. The reenactment was just 2 weeks ago. A little rainy, but I was able to go out there for a day, got some killer footage. They do a fantastic job with the reenactment. They have pyrotechnics there. They have, I don't know, a couple hundred reenactors on each side. And just the interpretation there. And they have, a lot of sutlery exhibits there and things like that. It's a good time. So I'm looking forward to going back.
Now, of course, at Alusty, the 54th Massachusetts are probably the most famous unit associated with it, but minus the 54th's involvement, which is it, before I ask my actual question, is it true that they did pull an entire supply train after that battle during the retreat? Okay, because I've heard everybody claiming it, so I'm like, I want to believe this.
I've read it 3 or 4 times, but so they acted as the rear guard. They came up and essentially saved what was left of the Union Army from essentially being decimated all the way back to Jacksonville. At some point, I want to say the name eludes me, but it was maybe about 10 miles from Alusty. Maybe, anyway, a locomotive broke down with wounded Union soldiers on it. And with the help of pack mules and some horses and the guys from the 54th, they pulled that thing, per the stories, 10 miles to where they can get back to a closer rail station and then obviously get the wounded to Jacksonville. So, I mean, I can't imagine not only marching all the way to Alusty, fighting, maybe some of your friends aren't here anymore, and now you're marching back to Jacksonville, pulling a train full of your wounded comrades. That's pretty incredible. I think your sound's out. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I had it muted. Yeah, I had myself muted. I was not paying attention.
I was like, hopefully I wasn't muted that whole time.
No, you were good. You're good. No, what I was going to ask was, minus the 54 thing, what's the most fascinating piece of info you've come across about Alusty that you think people should know about the battle, besides that the 54th Massachusetts fought there?
That it was percentage-wise. Now, this is a bit of a play on numbers, but the casualties the Union suffered there made it one of the bloodiest engagements for the Union for the entire war. When you look at the percentages of soldiers involved and the percentages of casualties they suffered, I believe they lost close to 50% of their force, which was just under 6,000. I believe it was like 5,600 and change. So thinking about you're fighting a 3-4 hour battle and half your force is on the field still. They're not coming back. So it's percentage wise, it was one of the bloodier battles for the Union. Maybe
And that's
not
key. That's
as
key
far
to
as like
remember
casualty
about.
figure, but yeah.
That's key to bring up. Oh, and I've mentioned this a few times. I actually mentioned in my first Minnesota video. You
Mhm.
get your casualties, and you're like, you might list these tens, hundreds, and that. But there's the other key value of percentage, and percentage is different from just the sheer numeric amount that have been dropped on the field. Because if you have a relatively small unit,
Mhm.
and you suffer, a high casualty percentage, that's going to show.
Yeah,
Like even just for
absolutely.
a small unit.
Mhm.
Let's say you have 100 guys that come out of small town America, and they go into this battle and they walk away with only 40 guys. And that means 60% have been made casualties, killed, wounded, captured.
Mhm.
That's going to be noticed. That is going to impact the psyche of those 40 people that came out unscathed. So
Mhm.
that's small scale. But when you get into those percentages, people, I think, don't consider that, because I think some people can really get into looking for the big battle at the thousands dead. Those are the big important. I'm like, just look at the small ones, and you start breaking down the percentages. And right there, you're having some very horrifying stories that deserve to be remembered.
Yeah. I mean, and then like you said, think about the impact of the families. You 100 guys go in the battle, 60 don't come home. That's 60 families that don't have someone. How many kids is that? How many wives is that? How many husbands is that? How many uncles, aunts are impacted from just that one soldier being killed? And so, the more I do this, and the older I get, you realize how precious life is and how many people it truly impacts. Just losing one. So I can't imagine a battle like Gettysburg, Antietam, Chickamauga, and there's just thousands and thousands of bodies on the ground. And now you have to spend weeks and weeks cleaning that up. And we all know what happens to bodies when they're exposed to the elements just for a couple days. So imagine, I think Chickamauga took, I want to say almost a month, I read, maybe a little under a month to fully clean up and get the wounded guys off the field. Like, think about that.
Levi the Nerd is advising some future video ideas. He's interested in seeing you do more Navy content, which would
Okay.
include the Battle Mobile Bay or Drury's Bluff.
All right. Noted, Levi. I will. You're a big supporter, so I'll make a note and do what I can. I did a couple modern day Navy stuff. I visited the USS Yorktown, which was awesome. Um, didn't allow myself enough time on an aircraft carrier. I think I only had a couple hours and only covered maybe a quarter of it. But yeah, some Civil War Navy stuff I think should be on the docket. I also covered the Hunley in Charleston,
You did.
which was a fantastic experience. I remember as a kid them raising it. I think it was on National Geographic Channel or something, but I think it was in 2000 they raised
It
it.
was, yes.
So going there and seeing it in this tank of, I forgot the name of the solution, but it helps preserve it. It kind of, brought my childhood full circle. Like, wow, like I saw it last year, I think. But yeah, it's incredible how obviously there's always that, especially in the video I posted, there's always, well, how can it be successful? They sank and died. I was like, yeah, but think about what they did. They sunk an enemy ship with a submarine, the first time ever on this planet.
This has
Like,
never been done before. This is
groundbreaking.
new ground.
Yeah.
Nobody thought it could be done, quite
Yeah.
honestly.
And
They
think
thought it
about
was
what that did
theory.
for warfare to come as in a world, as we knew what submarines did in World War I and World War II, and we know what submarines today are capable of. So
That
it's
is
just like,
effectively the Navy is today submarines and carriers.
yeah.
That is the Navy.
Yeah,
And there's
and
our
think
ships.
about, you can trace the beginnings back to the Hunley and those guys. So it's pretty incredible to see.
Now, let's think. My brain sometimes blows a fuse, and then it's like,
Uh,
oh, I was gonna do this
I'm
great
running out of
thing.
fuses, but
Running out of fuses. Oh, I can't borrow from you. So one of the sites I really enjoyed you going to, and I don't think a lot of people have actually seen this video, that was when you got to go visit the National D-Day Memorial.
oh wow, yeah.
Before your video, I had never heard of it existing. I did
Mhm.
not know the story of Bedford, Virginia. I did not know anything about that. and now it's on the docket to go. Maybe not this year, definitely next year. It's
Yeah.
like it's because it's in it's not the most astronomical reach for me. So
No, it's in a place that isn't uh it's not really close to any major hub. So during that trip I was in Richmond. So I think it was maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours to Bedford. But man, it's one of the coolest memorials that I've ever witnessed or seen. Um, very well done. It's just beautiful. It's kind of nestled on top of a hill and it just looks out over the mountains and it's very peaceful. But they also do a good job with the interpretation there. They have a little museum with some artifacts in it from D-Day. Um, and then of course, the fountains and the
yeah,
memorials and how the Rangers are climbing on the waterfall. It's just you can tell they put a lot of effort into planning that and it shows, and it was phenomenal. I wish I could have done a better video. Again, it was in the beginning, but I hope that at least
we
people
all have
know
to
of
start
it.
somewhere, James.
Yeah, yeah. I at least my goal is for people to know of it and then maybe see it for themselves. But yeah, it was incredible.
And I've read somewhere, I think they at least try to promote trying to do like a self-guided walking tour of Bedford relating to the Bedford boys. So try to go see like some of
Oh,
their
that'd be
stomping
cool.
ground. I've seen like brochures flown around like through their websites, and I'm like,
Mhm.
yeah, I'd love to go up and basically have any site I want to go to. I'm like, can I have 48 hours at minimum here? And it's like, no, I gotta go do all these other things because there's
Yeah,
so much stuff to see in so little time. But it's
you
like
always
each
have to
place,
triage.
yeah.
So it kind of plays into what you were talking about a little earlier. Take that little small town and think
Yes.
about all the men they lost just on the morning of June 6th of 44. And I think they were in the 29th. It wasn't, and there's probably cities and towns that lost more, but percentage wise, per the population of that town and the amount they lost, that's why the memorial's there. It's just another one of those, that impact that you were talking about.
Now I do have to ask because you're based out of Florida, correct?
Yep. St.
Okay.
Augustine.
Okay, so I have to ask because I'm based up here in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
What tends to be the major periods of history? What tends to seem the most popular periods of history in Florida, like that the average person may go see a historic site to?
That's tough because we have a little bit of everything.
That's a good thing.
Yeah, yeah, it's very
Which
diverse.
every place I like to say
Especially
does.
especially where I am, up in St. Augustine, you have a little bit of everything. You can tap into Native American history. You can tap into early colonial expansion and settlements. You can tap into um, American Revolution, the War of 1812, the American Civil War, World War II. They had U-boat observation posts off the coast of Florida, and I think a handful of German operatives landed on a place called Ponte Vedra, which is about 20 minutes north of where I am.
Oh wow.
Jacksonville is 45 minutes north of me, and there's huge naval history there with NAS Jax and Mayport. In Green Cove Springs, about 40 minutes from me, was one of the largest airfields during World War II. They trained, if you were a Hellcat pilot, you trained there in Green Cove. Um, but yeah, there's a little bit of everything. I mean, forts, you want to see forts, museums, if you're interested in space, like Kennedy Space Center. Um, but I would say, at least in my area, the Castillo de San Marcos and Fort Matanzas are probably the premier sites, along with Fort Mose. Fort Mose is getting more popular, which is
Yes,
just
yes.
north of St. Augustine. But yeah, I would say those, the
They just
Spanish influence.
recently, Fort Mosaic, they just recently, if I'm not mistaken, they're gonna reconstruct one of the forts, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, yeah, they've been working at it for a few years, and they finally got the funding this year. And word on the street is it's supposed to be done by fall of this year. So fingers crossed. I'm probably gonna. I went there early on in the journey. I want to stop by there and see if I can make a connection and maybe get that fort once it's done. Get that fort in a video and get some exposure over there because it's a really cool story, and they played a vital role in the defense of St. Augustine, so it's definitely important.
And we've actually talked about Fort Mosaic a couple times here, just in brief passing on Uncut History. One of the things we do here is a preservation shout out. So usually when I'm flying solo, I'll pick like a random swath of historic sites I've heard about in the past week and then talk about them. I've mentioned them several times because the more and more I read about what went down there, the videos I've seen from you and others about what occurred here, it's fascinating that we don't hear about it.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's again one of those tiny little sites tucked away in the shadow of St. Augustine, but has a really rich history. The Battle of Bloody Mosaic was fought there. Very bloody battle between the Spanish and freed slaves and some Native American warriors and the British. I believe they had a Highlander unit there.
Oh,
so it was a pretty intense battle, like something that shouldn't be overlooked. Fort Caroline, too. I mentioned that a little earlier, but there was a French settlement a little before St. Augustine was settled. It's debate whether it was on the north end of Jacksonville or southern end of Georgia, somewhere in that area, but the site is in Jacksonville. But yeah, there's a little bit of everything for everybody.
And one of the big things I get into now, my bread and butter tends to be in passion. I talk about the American Civil War. I could talk about it to death, as some people may say. I mean, just having a random unused copy of Gettysburg just laying around may show I may have a few screws.
That's
loose.
my childhood in that box.
Yeah, in this box, James
Gonna make me cry.
He did not know this is actually the very one. Actually, guys, you know, I went back in time and retrieved it, and this is why young James is now crying and sobbing because he's missing his VHS. It's actually going to cause a temporal rift as he goes down into the evil James plot. Anyways, what I was going to mention is, in addition to American Civil War, one of my big passions, and actually the thing I study the most is the French and Indian War. So I'm big into the transfer of history from, I guess you want to say, colonial history in North America over to the United States of America and how we get there. So many people do not understand that there were all these different colonies set up, not just for a few years and not just by the British Empire, but going back a few centuries in America. And that colonization, North America, was a big power struggle for multiple European nations. It impacted all of the indigenous population. I'm so used to talking about, you know, the British and the French coming over, British aligning with the Iroquois Confederacy, that I think that the Six Nations tend to be somewhat well known in terms of history just because of their involvement with the revolution. But then you get down to the stuff in Florida, and then you start getting to talks about the involvements with the Seminoles. You're getting talks about the Creek people. You're getting all these different involvement. And it's like, nobody talks about this. Spain has set up St. Augustine, the oldest continuous city in North America, at least if you're looking for the view of European settlement. You got all of these different colonies vying for control. Here in Pennsylvania, at one point Sweden tried to set up a colony in the east side of Pennsylvania before the Penn family came in and bought it all out. You know, there's these different. So it both. I think it explains a lot more why you have all of these conflicts occur over and over as North America develops into the United States of America. So get into the stuff about like Is it Fort Mosaic? So that's how we go with it, right?
Yeah, that's how I've always heard it pronounced, Mosaic.
So Fort Mosaic, you're getting into all of these earlier settlements like Fort Caroline. All of these are very important to explain. No. American history goes back way before before the magic four numbers.
Yes.
I noticed that you and I have a similar theme here where it must be for our emails we set up. We had to put in like a certain year or date or something.
Yeah.
So I see that you have 1565. If I'm not mistaken, that's referring to St. Augustine, correct?
Yep, that's when it was founded. I think Pensacola technically was founded, I want to say 59, but a hurricane came and destroyed most of the settlement. They didn't have any food, so it was abandoned. So then St. Augustine's now the nation's oldest European settlement. So
the reason I have 1754, if you ever see my handles, Read Out Productions 1754,
yeah, I saw that.
That's to signify the start of the French and Indian War, which
wow.
then you can go down the whole rabbit hole of the French and Indian War grown into the 7 Years' War and essentially setting the stage for the revolution to come. Like that's ground zero.
Yeah.
I go back there to Jumonville Glen here in Western Pennsylvania where the first shots were fired. And it's like, and here Lieutenant Colonel Washington made the biggest mistake of his life. And we call that the United States of America.
Yeah. So you're in Western PA?
Yes.
I was funny, oddly enough, that you're bringing this up. I think I would like to do a French and Indian War series, and I was looking at Juman. Is it Jumonville?
So we call it Jumonville. Think
Jumonville?
I think you if the French accent, it would have been Joseph Coyon de Jumonville, but
Jumonville? Okay.
yeah, it's Jumonville.
Okay.
Everybody says Jumonville. If
Okay.
you say Jumonville, the room here are like, "What the heck
Well,
are
if I'm
you?"
ever up that way, I will enlist your expertise because
I would be
up
more than
I
happy to assist.
yeah, yeah, because Fort Necessity is nearby. Braddock's
Yep.
Road, right? His grave or where they buried him.
Yeah, so it's actually one park entity with 3 units. It's
Okay.
Fort Necessity National Battlefield. They have the main unit where the Battle of Fort Necessity occurred, Washington's only military surrender. Then they have the grave site of General Edward Braddock preserved, who
Mhm.
commanded a later attempt by the British to take the Three Rivers. Since his grave is in Pennsylvania, you can tell it did not end well for Braddock. And then about a few miles up the road on top of Chestnut Ridge is where the Jumonville Glen unit is, and it's a very well preserved
Awesome.
tract of land. Like you go back there, the forest is not original, it's actually new growth, but it's grown back in the past 100 years that it's what it would have appeared like in 1754.
Yeah. Well, one of the cool things
Like
is
it's
those
eerie.
rocks weren't moved. Those rocks weren't going anywhere. Like
Yes. Yeah,
those
no,
are the
they didn't go
rocks.
anywhere. Yeah, they said the property was stripped bare in the turn of the century, but they said all the rocks, as far as we're aware, were here when this skirmish occurred, and
Mhm.
the vegetation's pretty indigenous to the region anyway.
Yeah.
So it's the only
Well,
thing you may have is a intensity of underbrush. Don't go walk into the underbrush in Pennsylvania. You'll end up with poison ivy and rattlesnakes. Don't do that ever.
yeah, yeah. It's
The old
I don't know how I haven't gotten it in Gettysburg because I wear shorts. That's all I wear, especially being
oh
in Florida,
god,
and I never get it. But
you are lucky.
I know because
I know. I go even in the when I'm out there in the summer. I'm in blue jeans out there walking.
yeah, I found Fuller's Monument in the Rose Woods. I was wearing gym shorts. Not one tick on me. But in Devil's Den, I had like 7 of them on my leg, which is weird.
Huh.
So,
Where all the people are, and who knows? I guess they're all attracted, like, oh, we could get some fresh blood over here because
yeah.
this is where everybody is gathering. Devil's Den, currently the viewing platform for Little Round Top, as I jokingly call it.
Mhm. Yeah.
Once I, so have you ever got the chance to be on Little Round Top?
Nope. So,
You have
first time
not
I
yet.
went to Gettysburg was August of 20, I don't even know what year it is. It's 24, right? Okay. So, I would say 22 I went to Gettysburg right after
Okay.
like a month
Right
after.
after.
Went again last year for the 160th. It was obviously still closed. Went again in November, obviously still closed. So,
You know, I'm of two minds of it. Of course, part of me is just like, oh, cool, it'll be open again. I'm great to see how the paths have been laid out. It's going to be nice that things won't be eroded because that's
mhm.
the big reason they're doing this. But there's the other half of me going, oh, I can't go near there for another 5 years because there's going to be so many people glomping on top of
Yeah.
that hill that it's just like, at least we have Culp's Hill.
Culp's Hill is awesome. Yeah, it's one
That's
of
the
those
history
things.
buff's favorite.
Yeah, it's one of the things like with Little Round Top being closed, it's forcing people to branch
Yes.
out to other spots of the battlefield. And especially like me, like I think I have like 25 videos of Gettysburg. Not one is Little Round Top. So that's a lot of other places getting some recognition. So especially like places like Culp's Hill, which I have recency bias. I was just there in November. So it's such an awesome area, especially in the winter with all the vegetation's down. You can really see the terrain for what it was. Such a neat area.
Now the Culp's Hill stuff, I've seen some videos, some like clippets. You've been teasing us more stuff about. Seems you have some stuff coming up with Fog of War podcasts. You
Yeah,
want
yeah.
to divulge a bit about what's your plans with the Fog of War podcasts?
Yeah, so I always get these ideas. It's just a matter of implementing them and finding the time. So I was like, we obviously have our platforms where we go to historic sites, make videos, and we view these things through the lens of a historian, right? But I want to get a little more personal. I want to see if a modern day combat veteran views things a little differently. Does he see the battlefield differently? Is he looking at different things? We're looking at the battlefield and we're looking at, okay, Union were here, the Confederates were here, they came up this way and they did this, and then both sides went this way. Like, does a combat veteran view things differently? Okay, so they're fighting at night, they don't have any training. This is why this is chaotic because of XYZ. This rock may offer good cover, but it can also offer a chance for ricochets, hitting you. So is it really good cover? Like, so I reached out to Colby with the America Fog of War podcast. I met him in Gettysburg during the 160th, and he seemed like an awesome guy. We kind of hit it off. And during a couple of months after Gettysburg, I just reached out to him. I was like, "Hey, would you want to work together on something? I don't really know what yet, but I want to work together." Went up there in November, and we just shot some stuff. We're just seeing if we can work together, and to see if this concept is doable. And it went pretty well. We're gonna try and get back together at some point this year and put some stuff out in the fall. This thing's still kind of evolving a bit, but that's the foundation of this. Is we're going to obviously go over the historical facts of what happened at a given location, but we're also going to get his insight, and maybe we can get a little bit more. We can read an account from 1863 and maybe understand it a little better. So that's the main goal of it.
I'm looking forward to it because I kind of stumbled across the Fog of War. It was right before you made your announcement about them, so I'd had just a knowledge about them, and it was their Antietam stuff, the couple episodes they did on
Yeah, yeah.
Antietam, and then it was like, I don't want to say it was like 24 hours after. I think it was a little bit longer, but it was like no sooner I listened to the Antietam stuff than you. Now it's like, oh, what are the odds? It's like it was meant to be.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
the algorithm.
We're excited. Obviously, logistically, it's a little tough because I'm in Florida and he's in Pennsylvania, but we're definitely going to get something out to you guys. And it's nothing groundbreaking. I'm sure it's been done before, but it's reviewing these battlefields through a different lens, I guess you can say, and maybe hopefully we can get a better understanding as to what we're looking at.
No,
That's the
I'm
main goal.
absolutely excited for it.
Yeah.
I think I mean, now my father, he's not a combat veteran, but he's been in the US Navy and then he served in the National Guard for many years. So he went through every single drill you can imagine in the 90s and early 2000s. The US military decided to throw at the Pennsylvanians. Uh, well, anytime I get a chance to take him to Gettysburg, it's always a blast because I took him to Little Round Top right before it closed down. And it was an impromptu trip, and it was really interesting getting to see his opinion of how he would approach things from up there. Like he was pointing out certain details that I never even noticed before, like that topography there, how we can use this to fortify and defend. And he's like, now these guys can't do that back then because they don't have these resources.
Yeah,
So it definitely is interesting getting that different perspective of there's a lot of similarities and there are those differences of how things have evolved, but it also reminds you that at the end of the day, it is war, and I hate to quote a video game, but war never changes.
yeah.
I,
Yeah,
I
well, I mean, Colby, when we met up in November, he said something that, I mean, reigns true. He's like, weapons change, but warriors don't. He's like, I fully believe that I can have a conversation with someone from a previous conflict and we can hit it off and know what we're talking about. So it's that human element to war that seems to be ingrained in humanity and probably will continue to be until the end of time. So why not
now, no,
understand it?
yeah, nope. We try to understand it and hopefully pray that people listen to us and learn these valuable lessons the easy way, so you don't have to do
Think.
it the hard way.
Yeah.
It's like, there's many channels and many books, and even sometimes even the movies do a not often, this is probably the exception, not the norm. And again, very mild. We try to make it easy on you guys. Why must you be so difficult? Why,
Hmm.
universe? But you have several projects. This could be a really good year for Project Pass, by the way. So if you've not subscribed, guys, to Project Pass, if you've never known who James is before, his link is in the description of the live stream right now. Consider going there and doing that, because one of the projects I am very excited to hear about is that he's going to do work relating to the Dades Massacre,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
I think, no disrespect to the chat, we may be the only two people here right now that know what that is.
Yeah.
Which is okay. That's why we make this content.
Yeah. And honestly, outside of maybe a year ago, I never knew it happened.
Same.
Just by chance, I did a video actually for Memorial Day. just a quick video at the National Cemetery in St. Augustine, just highlighting a few of the men there. And they have several pyramids there for all the soldiers that were killed during the Seminole Wars. So that was like my first exposure to it. Again, I knew it happened, but as far as like the minute details, I didn't know much of that. Um, and I just happened to be on Google. Google is a huge resource for me, like Google Maps. And I saw the Dade battlefield south of me. I think it's just outside of Bushnell, Florida. So I just got into doing research about that, learned that, two companies of United States soldiers were essentially ambushed and massacred in 1835. And, how the algorithm works, all of a sudden I'm getting notifications about, the reenactment. So I went to the reenactment in January, and it was phenomenal because, again, outside of some surface level stuff, I didn't know a whole lot about it. The interpretation around the reenactment that they did was spot on. Just they were sharing stories from the Seminole and the United States soldiers. So anyway, on December 28th of 1835, two companies of United States soldiers, I think 110, 108, somewhere in there, under the command of Francis Dade, were on their way from Fort Brooke in now Tampa to Fort King in Ocala. And they were expecting to be ambushed, oddly enough, but not where they were. There was a few river crossings. So, they had their guard up the first few days of the march. I think they left Fort Brooke at the 23rd. So they're marching through Christmas, got through some of the spots where they thought they were going to get hit, and they didn't. So they kind of let their guard down. Dade pulled in his flanking scouts. They're marching down a military road in their columns, and their flanking scouts are on the side of the columns to prevent an ambush. There's a little buffer. You have them in front, you have them behind, a few on the sides. So he pulled those guys in. A lot of the guys put their winter coats on over their muskets and their ammo pouches. And on December 28th, the Seminoles were stalking them the whole way. I think there was almost 200 of them under the command of Chief Micanopy. And on the 28th, they opened up, and one of the first volleys, Major Dade was killed. They had the marker where he was hit. That was pretty incredible to see, a little sobering. And they have a few other markers where officers were hit and killed. And then within a few hours, I think 108 of the 110 were killed. Two men survived. Private Ransom, and I don't know the other guy's name, but they retreated back to Fort Brooke. One of them was captured and killed again, and Ransom was the only one that made it back, which is why we have this story. But during the reenactment, they had a reenactor portraying Private Ransom, and they had a Seminole reenactor portraying Chief Micanopy, and they're summarizing what you're seeing. So it was really informative. I want to go back during the summer. I do have a contact that I'm going to meet up with, and just do a video about what happened there. Just let's understand it. As as an American, as someone who served in the Army, you're obviously, immediately you're like, wow, 110 U.S. soldiers killed. That's terrible. Of course that's terrible, but it's like, let's understand the bigger picture, why this ambush occurred. And, I think it helps us understand these actions better. But yeah, it was a very eye-opening experience, and I'm looking forward to getting that out sometime during the summer.
Did they say, were you in the small, did they have like a visitor center there, I presume?
Yeah,
Or like
yeah, they
okay.
have a section of the actual road that they marched on, what's left of it, and then they have a interpretive center with a video and some exhibits and stuff, and then they have just like the reenactment field. But it's more than I expected. I was expecting maybe a small building with some palm fronds and palmettos in a field, but the interpretation was a pleasant surprise. They did a great job.
So you said that there's only one survivor, or at least one person who was able to deliver on the American side, eyewitness testimony of what happened.
Mhm.
Are there oral histories on the Seminole side that have been
Yeah,
passed
yeah.
down? Okay.
To my knowledge, I think Chief Micanopy wrote an account, and I think there's a few others. But yeah, so again, like how things sometimes the story gets a little, it
Yeah.
changes a little bit. But I've read as many as there were 3 survivors, and one was killed, and then Ransom made it back, and another one made it back a few days later. I've read that only Private Ransom made it back. But I mean, regardless, it was a massacre.
Yeah.
But yeah, there is accounts from the Seminole side. I was actually reading one before coming on, and it was really cool. You can just literally type in "Dade Massacre" and you'll see some of the stuff pop up from Chief Micanopy, and it's pretty vivid. I think the Seminoles. He even goes into the casualties they suffered. So it's pretty neat to learn, especially from the side of the Seminole, because that's the side that you just automatically overlook or don't pay attention to. So it's pretty informative, and I'm looking forward to sharing the full story.
I am looking forward to, because as much as I would, as much as I'm like, oh, I want to go here, I want to go there, I also have to be realistic. And there are some
Yeah.
places that I'm like, I don't know if I'm ever have the chance to go see it. So I'm like, go, James, go. I will live
Yeah,
vicariously through you in this video.
it's about 2 hours away, so it's not like I can just hop in and
Oh yeah.
But I am planning on going back beginning of summer, and hopefully, I'll get it out by midsummer. That's obviously going to be, the vlog style, but I want to do it a little different, maybe add a little more to it, maybe a little more documentary-ish. But yeah, that's one of the things I'm looking forward to this year for sure.
Now, I have to ask, what is it? What place do you want to go in the future for the channel? Not necessarily that you plan, but more just out, just ballparking it. Like, I would love to go to this place, and I'd love to do a
Yeah.
full series. What one place is off the top of your head that you dream that you'll be able to go and see?
That list gets longer by the day.
That's why I said one. It doesn't have to be the one.
Stateside, Harper's Ferry and Fredericksburg, that area, Petersburg. See, I'm just going to start listing them. Shiloh. Um, uh, Globally, obviously Normandy. I've never been to Europe. Bastogne. Iwo Jima would be fantastic, but I know logistically, from what I've heard, it's really, really hard.
Yeah.
Um,
Yes.
but yeah,
Uh,
I think those are good spots.
History Reel actually posted a, is it History Real History? Oh, I always get
Oh yeah,
Frederick.
like a walkthrough of Iwo Jima.
Yeah,
Yes.
he did a video. Yeah, it's Real History. Okay, I was
Mhm.
saying history earlier. Real
With
History.
Jared, right? His name's
He had
Jared.
the yeah, Jared Frederick. He got the chance to go a few months back, and he actually has a whole video. It would be probably one of the few chances he'll one of the few chances anybody ever got a chance to go and see, but he was able to get that opportunity, and the
Mhm.
content he made for that is phenomenal because you hear about Iwo Jima, it's this mythologized engagement of World War II. I mean, here in Pennsylvania, actually one of the people in the Joe Rosenthal photograph, they were actually born not far from my house. They were
Really?
raised in that, yeah, not far. So
Wow.
it's a big, everybody knows about the flag raising. Not too many people know about what happened after the actual battle that ensued because it was chaos.
Mhm.
But what I'm bringing up is you hear about these places, and Iwo Jima is one of those where it's kind of it's so mystical. It's like it's this mythical place because it isn't like a Gettysburg where you can go and it's not hard to go visit it. It's not like Bastogne. It's not that difficult to go see Bastogne, relatively
Mhm.
speaking. But Iwo Jima, there's these places in history, these major events in there you can't really be teleported to them.
No.
Iwo Jima, thankfully, if you have the rare opportunity, but I've always thought about like how some of the naval engagements, these battles we talk about history that occurred on the seas, and we talk in so much detail. It's like it's really hard. That got to be really hard for some people to interpret, for historical interpretation.
Yeah.
Like the Battle of Midway would be a perfect example. Probably the most important naval battle in world history, and there's no place, there's no monuments for those guys. There's no places to visit out there. It's only been recently they've uncovered some of the Japanese carrier wrecks. Before
Mhm.
that, the only thing they knew about was where the Yorktown was, and that wasn't until 98. So it's very interesting. You have some of these historic sites that we take for granted.
Yeah.
Gettysburg is a perfect example because it's so well detailed and so well marked. Then you have other places like Alusty where it's like, well, we have the general location reserved and some markings, but we don't have the resources to go in more detail. And it's also smart battle.
Yeah.
Then you have stories like Franklin, where the Franklin battlefield was lost for hundreds of years. And it's
Mhm.
only been the past 30 years that the Franklin Battlefield Trust have done the greatest story of historical reclamation I've ever heard of.
Yeah.
If
I
you
had
look
the
at
opportunity to go last year. It was phenomenal.
and they're going to keep doing more and more work, I know, in future years. So I'm looking forward to see that. But then there's just these places where these stories, it is just they're mythical. It's almost they've
Yeah.
been to mythical regions. It's interesting.
Yeah, it's also think about like fighting in those isolated areas, it's like probably that sense of outside of your
Yeah.
comrades next to you, like you're just alone, and then, a couple weeks go by and then you leave and then you're on some other isolated island.
Well,
Wake Island would be a cool
yeah.
one to visit too. That comes to mind. But yeah, it's just I wish there was a more efficient way to go there and share those stories and keep those stories alive too. Because like you said, we can go to a battlefield and there's plaques and signage and something there is keeping that story alive. Something in the middle of the ocean, like you said, it's impossible. We have pictures of the wrecks, but if you're not Googling those, you're not going to know about them.
Now I do have to ask. And now this is where we get into the good, the juicy details.
Oh, okay.
Is Antietam the most bug-ridden battlefield you've ever been to?
Good Lord, man. Coming from Florida, like I was like, there's no way, like nothing's going to be buggier than Florida. I went to Antietam for the first time in August. Like I was coming back from Gettysburg. I flew into Dulles. So I was coming back through Antietam, stopped at Antietam, flew up the next day. But I got out of the car. I was like, I am not prepared for this. I had no bug spray. I had no nothing. They were everywhere.
Yeah, I was actually, I don't think we crossed paths, but been there about the same amount of time because I was there in August as well. And we were coming back from Ferry, and we weren't going to spend the whole day. They're only about 2 or 3 hours, and I'm like, because I really want to show my friends the Sunken Road. Like I want to go show them Bloody Lane. That's like that's the part of the Antietam I'm so fascinated by. So we're there, and oh my god, I'm just there. You can see it even in the final product and there is so much B-roll from that thing people will never see because it is just me going. And all of us just like that. It's like, what did we do? We didn't step on anything, did we? I don't know what it is about Antietam. And I've heard other people say this.
Yeah. And then I went in July. It wasn't as bad. August was terrible. And then in November,
Must be
it was beautiful.
August. Must be August where they just have a bad
and it was no matter where you were at the Sunken Lane, Burnside's Bridge. Like I did a few episodes that day, and my Lord, they don't bite, but they were just everywhere.
No, yeah, but yeah, it's like, what did I do to upset these hordes? These benevolent hordes. I don't know.
Yeah, it was wasn't prepared for that. I also wasn't prepared for, again, coming from Florida. Obviously in winter the days are a little shorter everywhere, but in the Northeast are a lot shorter than they are in Florida. So I was filming. Again, I landed. I went right to Antietam. I was like, all right, I'll film from 1 to 5. I'll have plenty of time. I'm filming, and it's like barely 4 o'clock, and I'm losing sunlight. I'm like, all right, I didn't anticipate this. 4:15, I can barely see the monuments. I was like, I don't have enough light. Like I didn't anticipate.
Oh no.
Yeah, but that's how you learn. That's part of the YouTube life, I guess.
Yeah, well, the farther north, when you get up, especially here to Pennsylvania, where it's like, what weather do you have? Yes. What do you mean? Yes, we have it all. In April, and I don't know if you ever saw this one. I tried to do a video on like the Confederate monuments at Gettysburg, go down Seminary Ridge. We did 2 videos. We did one, which was an earnest documentary about the monuments. Then we did a ranking of the monuments, which was more of a corny, cheesy, us like poking fun at some myths about the Confederacy and just have like I even said like, guys, this isn't meant to be taken seriously. And I am gonna one day do a Union one to balance it out, just like whose monument is the craziest, because some of the stories behind them, when you go into the stories of monuments at Gettysburg on both sides, some of these guys can get very petty, I will say. It's like, my monument's this, but no, mine gotta be this big now. No, I can only be here. No, gotta be, and it's like, oh my god.
Or how they put themselves a little closer to the
yeah.
Yeah, like, well, the 11th Mississippi, no, the 26th North Carolina, no, we're this close. It's like,
there was a full court case involving the 72nd PA because theirs right up the angle. Well, anyways, we went out there and filming, and it was pouring, like April rain pouring. So if you watch that Confederate monument retracing history, you'll notice it's very differently formatted there is no videos of me on site because it was just coming down. But what
Mhm.
was so funny was I had anticipated it was going to be a washout the whole weekend. And I'm like, I'm not letting this spoil my fun. So I got my duck boots out. I had everything ready to go in the car. My poor friend, a humble collector, he was actually the one driving that day. And he didn't understand why I'm packing all the stuff in. Then I get out and I'm like tying boots on. He's like, wait, you're seriously going out there? I'm like, yes, I'm seriously going out there. I am deranged. This is my time and I'm not going to waste it. So unfortunately, he did not have shoes that were up to the caliber of rain. He
Nope.
was a trooper and he wanted to stick by me the whole way through it. But one person had dry feet and the other may have had trench foot at the end of that weekend. But, it is what it is. Then the next time it was November this time. And we're on
Mhm.
Seminary Ridge again. And now you haven't made, I don't think you've reached my level of nerdom yet, where I went to Gettysburg to document nothing from 1863, but the 1922 Marine maneuvers that occurred there.
Yeah.
Because
Okay.
I've reached that point. So we're on Seminary Ridge talking about it. And I filmed very briefly a moment where I'm like, so here I am by the North Carolina monument. I was here 6 months ago. It was pouring rain when I was supposed to talk about this. Now I'm here and it's beautiful out. I am not here to talk about the North Carolina monument. Anyways,
That's usually how it goes.
it really is. I never have. You could probably count the number of times both of us have had like sunny weather to film on like both hands.
Yeah.
At least for me,
Yeah.
it seems like every time I plan something, weather goes kaput.
I think majority of the time I've been pretty fortunate. The illustrious reenactment was rainy, but my problem is like on my second, no, maybe it was my first trip to Gettysburg. Before I was leaving, I was just kind of driving through, came across Coster Avenue, empty. Did like a quick 10 minutes just to take in the site, and then when I came back, I was like, I'm going to film there. So I came back with an episode ready to go. There was 30 people on Coster Avenue.
What are the odds?
Exactly. And I had to sit there and wait like 20 minutes. It's like, I don't mind filming with people there, but that's such a small area that like 5 people, like, I don't want people in the background or like, how sometimes people get weird, like, hey, don't film me. It's like, well, I'm not. We're
Yeah.
just in it. But so, I had to wait like 15, 20 minutes. Luckily, they left. But I was just like, what are the chances? Like, if I came 20 minutes earlier or 5 minutes later, I would have never known that this large group is here. But I'm here to film and there's 30 people here. But
This Saturday's video, they'll be coming out when I was filming it. I had to keep adjusting my location. The one time I'm standing, I'm doing pretty good. I'm like, pretty proud of myself. Okay, I haven't flubbed my lines yet. I haven't like mentally broke. And I'm having to deal with the cars because there's the historic building and there's a major highway and then there's me. So I'm having to take breaks as the cars pass. I was standing in front of a laundromat and there's this older lady folding her clothes. And then here I come walking down the street and talking to myself, or what it looks like. And she just for the longest time was just staring at me.
yep, the
And
awkward stare. Yeah.
yeah, I had to relocate. I had to go a few feet. I'm like, okay, I'm disturbing the local population. I do not intend that. And I'm just like, okay, we're just gonna go over here. And she's probably still staring at me, but we're not on the same line of sight anymore, so we're good.
You
We're
can
good.
still
But
feel them though. Anytime you
you
hold it
can
up, you can
feel
like
them.
feel it.
You can feel
And
it.
you're
It's
just
like,
like,
I'm not doing anything wrong. I promise. I'm trying to talk about history. And
right?
GW slept here. You have that a lot here in Pennsylvania. If you didn't know, we do actually have that a lot here. I've always wanted to make a sign, like a wooden sign, and I've wanted to sell it, like a craft, and it just says "Ye Old Tavern, George Washington slept here," and be like it could be a home decor decoration and go on
Yeah.
people's doors
You increase
because
their visitation for sure.
it really could. I also like you've probably seen the photograph of somebody who sells a plate that says on this date and such and such time, nothing happened here.
Yeah, those are great. I like those. There's one in New Orleans I came across, and it got me. We're walking. I forgot what street we are, but we were walking. I was like, oh, this looks like a historic house or something. I go up and I look at it. I was like, oh God, got me on the ring camera. I'm sure.
Absolutely nothing happened here.
Yeah, that's exactly what it said.
Except you probably can do some research and probably find something small happened there. Maybe not majorly important, but
yeah.
well, we're winding down, James. Is there any final things you want to mention? Anything you need to promote?
Oh gosh, I'm a terrible self promoter. But thank you for having me on. If Josh from History Saver is watching, or if he watches in the future, thank you for recommending me to come on the show. I appreciate it. Appreciate all the support. Had a great time. Yeah, whenever you want to hang out or do this again, let me know. And if I'm ever up your way, I definitely would like to hit on some French and Indian War stuff. So
Well, I am always up to helping people understand the French and Indian War because it's a big bowl of wibbly wobbly, timey wimey stuff, and
yeah,
there's a lot of moving parts, and then you have to visualize it over modern Western Pennsylvania, which is just urban sprawl from the forks of the Ohio till you hit the ridges. Now, once you get across the ridges, you're fine, but where a lot of the actions occurred, it's like, so this is urban sprawl. There was something here.
yeah, there
There's
was.
there's a battlefield. Actually, technically should be a battlefield in Pittsburgh. One problem, they removed like a half a dozen feet of dirt to put in like modern day buildings. So you're not standing on the battlefield, you're standing under the battlefield.
It's an
Yeah,
interesting perspective.
it's great. It's great. Well, we're winding down, folks. I'd like to thank you all for tuning in. James, thank you for coming on and being a guest. You will most certainly be welcomed back on in the future, providing that I don't fall down a rabbit hole that I can't escape from anytime soon.
Be strong. Be strong.
Yeah. I have a friend of mine who says that I should call them cookie jars, my projects, and it's like, and I'm like, that doesn't help. I don't need to be eating a bunch of cookies. And he paused. He's like, I never thought of it that way.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, I like your idea, but this is not, they're rabbit holes, and I enjoy many different topics of history. That's the worst part. It's like, what, when somebody asks like, you're a historian, and I'll be like, yes. It's like, yeah, I'm into history. And they're like, so you know about the Roman Empire? And I'm like, let's get a little bit more recent.
Yeah.
And that's like the game. I don't know if everybody's ever had that with you. They're like, oh, you're into history. And then everything they mention, you're like, I have no idea about that. And
Oh,
you're like,
yeah,
but you're a historian. And
find
it's like,
I don't know more than I know. So
yeah.
especially when I'm married to a history teacher. She's like, oh, you'll like this. I'm like, I've never heard of that.
What is this
I was
contraption?
like, but have you been to Gettysburg?
Yeah, you'd be like, I have been. All right, guys. Well, we are going to. Well, first I have to hit that button. Then I got to hit that button. There's a lot of buttons behind the scenes here. Very high tech, of course.
Yeah.
Where is it at? Well, guys, I'd like to thank you guys for tuning in. We will be here next Thursday for another edition of Uncut History. Be sure, though, to go check out James's page, Project Pass. And if this is your first time journeying to Readout Productions, consider joining us here in the Garrison of Historical Preservation. We do videos Saturdays, Thursdays, we do live streams. Sometimes I post videos on Tuesdays. All right. Thank you guys for coming. I need to find a better, gotta reformat this video. It's, for when I edited my intro, funny story, I put it in like a 1:1 ratio, didn't realize it. Now I have to stick to it.